2 years ago, my brother John called me a dropout with delusions at my cousin's wedding. Yesterday, that same cousin asked me to mentor her daughter through medical school applications. The irony wasn't lost on me. She was sitting in the clinic I'd built from nothing, asking for help from the woman she'd once pitied. I'm Mia Smith, and this is the story of how I learned that sometimes the people who claim to love you are the last ones to see who you've become. Hey everyone, before we dive into today's story, I'd love to know where you're all watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. It's always amazing to see how far these stories travel. The text came at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. Mom's contact photo, her perfectly posed headshot from the country club directory, filled my phone screen. Family dinner Sunday. 5 p.m. Don't be late. No pleasantries, no, how are you? Just an order delivered with the efficiency of someone who'd never been told no. I stared at the message while my coffee grew cold. The last family dinner had been 8 months ago, right after I'd received my certification as a nurse practitioner. John had spent the entire evening explaining to anyone who'd listen why nurse practitioners were just playing doctor. Mary, my sister, had nodded along, her medical degree apparently giving her permission to join in the mockery. But something had shifted in those 8 months. The community health clinic I'd opened in the underserved part of town was thriving. Patients lined up before dawn for appointments. Local news had featured us twice. The state health department had called it a model program. Still, none of that mattered when I walked into Mom's dining room that Sunday. The house smelled like lemon polish and disappointment, the same way it had since I was 17 and told them I wanted to be a nurse instead of following Mary into surgery. Crystal glasses caught the light from the chandelier Dad had installed after his promotion to hospital administrator. Everything gleamed with the kind of perfection that comes from having enough money to make problems disappear. John was already holding court, his voice carrying that particular tone he used when he wanted everyone to remember he was chief of cardiology at 35. His wife, Collins, sat beside him, nodding at appropriate intervals while scrolling through her phone. Mia. Mary's voice was bright in the way it got when she was about to say something cutting. Still playing neighborhood nurse? I set down my purse and took the seat that had been mine since childhood, the one facing the kitchen, where I could watch Mom's face for signs of disapproval. Still practicing medicine, I replied evenly. John laughed, the sound sharp enough to cut glass. Come on, Mia. Let's not pretend it's the same thing. You're giving flu shots and checking blood pressure. Mary's performing brain surgery. The thing about being dismissed is that it becomes background noise after a while. White noise that hums just below consciousness until you learn to tune it out. I'd gotten good at tuning it out. How's the clinic doing? Dad asked, and for a moment, I thought someone might actually want to know. We're seeing about 200 patients a week now, I began. The diabetic care program has reduced hospital readmissions by 30% in our catchment area, and we've gotten approval to expand. That's nice, dear, Mom interrupted, setting down a platter of roast beef with the precision of someone orchestrating a performance. Collins, tell us about the new house. And just like that, I was erased. Again. Dinner proceeded with the familiar rhythm of a play I'd watched too many times. John talked about his latest surgical innovation. Mary shared stories from her pediatric residency. Collins discussed interior design choices for their new mansion. I ate in silence, counting the number of times someone asked me a direct question that wasn't immediately redirected. 0. It wasn't until dessert that the conversation took an unexpected turn. Did you see the article in the Tribune about healthcare deserts? Collins asked, finally looking up from her phone. Apparently there's this clinic in the East Side that's doing amazing work with underserved populations. My fork paused halfway to my mouth. The Tribune article. I'd forgotten it was coming out this week. Oh yes, Mary said, leaning forward with interest. Dr. Peterson mentioned it at rounds. Some nurse practitioner opened a clinic and it's apparently getting national attention. The model is so innovative they're thinking of replicating it statewide. John scoffed. Probably just good PR. Anyone can make statistics look impressive if they massage the numbers right. I watched them discuss my work like I wasn't sitting 3 feet away. Like the clinic they were praising wasn't the same one they'd mocked me for opening. Like some nurse practitioner wasn't their sister and daughter. The article mentioned partnerships with 3 universities, Collins continued, reading from her phone. And something about a telemedicine program that's revolutionary? Honestly, whoever this woman is, she's brilliant. Mom nodded approvingly. It's wonderful when people find their calling. Even if it's not traditional medicine, there's value in helping people. Even if it's not traditional medicine. The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire no one wanted to acknowledge. I set down my fork. The clinic is mine. The table went quiet. Not the comfortable quiet of a satisfied meal, but the sharp quiet that comes right before glass breaks. What? Mary's voice was small, uncertain. The clinic you're talking about. The one in the Tribune article. The one with the innovative model and the university partnerships. It's mine. I built it. John's laugh was immediate, reflexive. Mia, come on. This is serious. I pulled out my phone, opened the Tribune app, and turned the screen toward them. There was my photo, professional and confident, above the headline, Local NP's clinic becomes model for rural healthcare access. The silence stretched longer this time. Collins leaned forward, squinting at the screen. Mary's mouth opened and closed without sound. Dad reached for his reading glasses. This is you? Mom's voice was barely above a whisper. This is me. What followed wasn't the explosion I'd expected. It was worse. It was the slow, uncomfortable rearrangement of a worldview that had suddenly proven inadequate. John was the first to recover. Well, that's, congratulations, I guess. Though I still think the scope of practice issues. John. Dad's voice cut through whatever condescending thing my brother was about to say. He was studying my phone screen with the intensity he usually reserved for budget reports. This says you've decreased emergency department visits by 40%. That you've established the first nurse-led chronic disease management program in the state. I nodded. We also provide mental health services, addiction counseling, and we're piloting a program for pregnant teenagers that's already reduced preterm births by 25%. Mary was reading over Dad's shoulder, her face growing paler with each paragraph. Mia, this article, it says you're being considered for the Governor's Healthcare Innovation Award. The nomination was submitted last month. Collins looked up from her own frantic Googling. Your clinic has a 5-star rating and a 6-month waiting list. How did we not know about this? The question hung in the air like incense in a church, heavy and impossible to ignore. You never asked, I said simply. The conversation that followed was stilted, artificial. Suddenly everyone wanted to know about my work, but their questions felt like boxes they were trying to fit me into. Safe boxes. Boxes that made sense with their understanding of who I was supposed to be. So you're basically running a small doctor's office? John asked, still trying to minimize what he couldn't comprehend. I'm running a comprehensive primary care facility with specialized programs for vulnerable populations. We have 6 full-time staff members, 3 part-time specialists, and we're training sites for nursing students from 4 different universities. But you're still a nurse, Mary said, as if that settled something. I'm a nurse practitioner with a doctorate in nursing practice, specialized training in family medicine, and board certifications in diabetes education and psychiatric mental health. But yes, I'm still a nurse. I've never tried to be anything else. Mom stood abruptly, began clearing plates with sharp, efficient movements. "Well, this is all very impressive, Mia. We should have asked more questions." It wasn't an apology, but it was as close as I'd ever get from her. The evening limped toward its conclusion with everyone trying too hard to show interest in what they'd ignored for months. John asked about my patient demographics. Mary wanted to know about my referral patterns. Collins inquired about my marketing strategy. But the damage was done. Not the damage to me, I'd built my armor long ago. The damage to them. The slow, creeping realization that they'd been sitting at the table with someone they didn't recognize, someone whose accomplishments exceeded their expectations so thoroughly that those expectations had crumbled entirely. As I gathered my things to leave, Dad walked me to the door. "Mia," he said, his voice carrying a weight I'd never heard before. "I owe you an apology." I waited. "We've been thinking of you as the daughter who chose the easier path. The one who couldn't handle the rigor of medical school, who settled for something less demanding." He paused, his hands working nervously at his sides. "But you didn't choose the easier path. You chose the harder one. You chose to serve people the rest of us forgot about." I felt something shift in my chest, like ice beginning to crack. "You built something from nothing," he continued. "And you did it without our support, without our encouragement, and despite our doubt. That takes more strength than anything John or Mary has ever done." For a moment, I thought about all the times I'd wanted to hear those words. All the dinners where I'd sat silent, hoping someone would see past their preconceptions and notice who I'd become. "Thank you," I said finally. "That means more than you know." 2 weeks later, the governor's office called. I'd won the Healthcare Innovation Award. The ceremony would be televised. The prize included a $50,000 grant to expand rural healthcare access. I thought about calling my family first, but I didn't. Instead, I called Dr. Patricia Williams, the elderly physician who'd mentored me through my early years as a nurse practitioner. The woman who'd believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. "Congratulations, my dear," she said, her voice warm with pride. "Though I can't say I'm surprised. You've been changing lives since the day you walked into my office." That evening, my phone buzzed with texts from my family. John's was brief, "Saw the news. Proud of you." Mary's was longer, full of exclamation points and promises to visit the clinic soon. Mom called and left a voicemail that I listened to 3 times, trying to decipher the emotion in her voice. But it was Collins who surprised me most. Her text was simple: "I've been reading about your clinic all week. What you've built is extraordinary. I'm sorry it took us so long to see it." The awards ceremony was held in the state capitol, in a room full of politicians and healthcare administrators who understood the significance of what I'd accomplished. As I walked to the podium to accept the award, I scanned the audience and found my family in the 3rd row. They'd all come. John in his best suit, looking uncomfortable but present. Mary with tears in her eyes. Mom and Dad holding hands, their faces reflecting a mixture of pride and regret. Collins recording everything on her phone. "Healthcare," I began, my voice steady in the microphone, "isn't about prestige or hierarchy. It's about meeting people where they are and giving them the care they need, when they need it, without judgment or barriers." I talked about Mrs. Rodriguez, the diabetic grandmother who hadn't seen a doctor in 5 years before finding our clinic. About teenage mother Jasmine, whose baby was born healthy because someone finally listened to her concerns. About Mr. Thompson, the veteran whose depression went untreated until we created a space where he felt safe enough to ask for help. The communities we serve don't need heroes, I concluded. They need consistency. They need respect. They need healthcare providers who see them as whole human beings deserving of dignity and excellent care. That's what we've tried to provide, and that's what we'll continue to provide as we expand this model across the state. The applause was thunderous. As I left the podium, my family was on their feet, clapping harder than anyone else in the room. At the reception afterward, something had shifted. My colleagues approached my parents to congratulate them on raising such an accomplished daughter. Hospital administrators asked John about his sister's innovative programs. Medical school professors sought out Mary to discuss potential collaborations. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't invisible at my own table. I keep waiting for someone to ask me what I do, I told Collins as we stood near the dessert table. She smiled, but there was sadness in it. I keep thinking about all the dinners where we talked around you instead of to you. All the times we made assumptions instead of asking questions. You couldn't have known. We should have known, she interrupted. Or at least, we should have tried to know. That's what families are supposed to do. 6 months after the awards ceremony, my clinic had expanded to 3 locations. The university partnerships had grown into a full-fledged nursing education program. I'd been invited to speak at conferences in 12 states. And my family had finally learned to ask the right questions. John visited the clinic on a Thursday afternoon, ostensibly to see if there were opportunities for cardiac referrals. But I watched him interact with our patients, saw the way his usual clinical detachment softened when Mrs. Chen showed him pictures of her grandchildren. When he left, he hugged me, actually hugged me, and said, "What you're doing here matters more than anything I do in the OR." Mary started sending me complex pediatric cases that needed ongoing primary care management. She'd called to discuss treatment plans, asking for my input with genuine respect for my clinical judgment. "You see the whole family," she said during one of these calls. "I only see the disease. Your perspective makes me a better doctor." Mom joined the clinic's advisory board, using her social connections to secure funding for our mental health programs. "I want to help," she said simply when I asked why. "I want to be part of what you've built." But it was Dad who surprised me most. He started volunteering at the clinic one Saturday a month, using his administrative expertise to streamline our operations. "I spent 30 years in hospital administration," he told me. "I forgot that healthcare is supposed to be about healing, not revenue streams. Working here reminds me why I got into this field." Last month, I was invited to present my clinic model to the National Association of Nurse Practitioners. As I stood before an audience of my peers, sharing the story of how we transformed healthcare delivery in our community, I thought about all the family dinners where I'd sat silent. About all the times I'd been told I wasn't enough. About the long path from being dismissed to being recognized. "The most important thing I've learned," I told that audience, "is that healthcare excellence isn't about prestige or pedigree. It's about showing up consistently for the people who need you most. It's about creating spaces where dignity and clinical excellence coexist." After the presentation, a young nursing student approached me. "Dr. Smith," she said, "I'd completed my DNP the previous year. I'm starting my family practice rotation next month. My family keeps asking when I'm going to become a real doctor. How do you handle that?" I smiled, remembering 17-year-old me, defending my choice to become a nurse while everyone around me suggested I was settling for less. "You remind them," I said, "that healing comes in many forms. And that sometimes the most important medicine we provide isn't a prescription or a procedure, it's the act of seeing someone fully and treating them with respect." She nodded, something shifting in her expression. "Thank you. I needed to hear that." Last Sunday was my nephew's birthday party, John's son. The whole family was there, plus extended relatives I hadn't seen in years. As we sat around the backyard table, conversation flowed naturally between everyone's updates and achievements. When it was my turn to share news, the table didn't go quiet. People leaned in, asked follow-up questions, wanted details about the new funding we'd received, the research study we were participating in, the medical residents who'd be rotating through our clinic starting next month. My Aunt Helen, whom I hadn't spoken to in 5 years, pulled me aside later. "Mia, I have to tell you something. My neighbor's daughter is in nursing school, and when I told her my niece was Dr. Mia Smith from the clinic that's been in all the healthcare journals, she nearly fainted. She said you're famous in nursing circles. That your clinic is the model everyone's trying to replicate." I laughed. "I'm not famous, Aunt Helen. I just found work that matters to me." "Don't you dare minimize what you've accomplished," she said, her voice fierce with pride. "You've saved lives. You've changed how healthcare works in this state. You've proven that nurse practitioners can be leaders in ways nobody imagined." That evening, as the party wound down and I helped clean up, Mary found me in the kitchen. "I've been thinking," she said, drying dishes with unusual focus, "about all those dinners where we talked over you. About how we made you feel invisible." I set down the plate I'd been washing. "Mary. No, let me say this. I was jealous. I spent 8 years in medical training, accumulating debt and credentials and titles. And you just went out and started healing people. You built something that mattered without waiting for permission or recognition." She paused, looking directly at me for what felt like the first time in years. "I thought prestige was the same as impact. I thought hierarchy was the same as effectiveness. I was wrong. What you've done is more important than anything I've accomplished, and I should have seen that sooner." 2 weeks ago, I received an email that made me sit down hard in my office chair. The subject line read, "National Healthcare Innovation Fellowship." I'd been selected as one of 12 healthcare providers nationwide to participate in a year-long fellowship focused on expanding access to primary care. The program would take me to rural communities across the country, helping them develop sustainable healthcare delivery models. When I called my family to share the news, the responses were immediate and enthusiastic. John wanted to know if I'd be documenting my experiences for a medical journal. Mary offered to cover any of my patients who needed specialty consultations while I was traveling. Mom started researching the communities I'd be visiting so she could send care packages to my temporary offices. Dad's response was the simplest and most meaningful: "I can't think of anyone better suited for this work. The communities you'll serve are lucky to have you." As I write this, I'm preparing for my departure next month. The clinic is in excellent hands. We've trained a team of nurse practitioners who share our commitment to dignity-centered care. The expansion sites are thriving. The university programs are producing a new generation of healthcare providers who understand that healing happens in relationships, not just procedures. I think about 17-year-old me sometimes. The girl who chose nursing over pre-med despite everyone's disappointment. The girl who believed that caring for people was its own form of expertise. The girl who was told she was settling for less when she was actually choosing more humanity, more connection, more direct impact. It took my family years to see what I'd known all along, that healthcare isn't about hierarchy. It's about healing. It's about creating spaces where people feel safe enough to be vulnerable, respected enough to trust, and valued enough to hope. The fellowship will take me to communities that remind me of where I started, places where people have been forgotten by traditional healthcare systems, where access is limited and trust has been broken. Places where a nurse practitioner with a commitment to dignity-centered care can make the difference between despair and hope. My family understands that now. They see that my choice to become a nurse wasn't about limitations, it was about possibilities. Possibilities for connection, for innovation, for healing that goes beyond diagnosis and treatment to encompass the full spectrum of human need. Last Sunday, at our now regular family dinners, John's 5-year-old son asked me what I do for work. I take care of people, I told him. Like a doctor? He asked. Before I could answer, John spoke up. Better than a doctor, buddy. Aunt Mia takes care of the whole person, not just the sick parts. Mary nodded. She helps people stay healthy and feel heard. Collins added, and she built a place where people who couldn't get healthcare before can go to get better. Mom smiled. She saw a problem and fixed it. That's what leaders do. I looked around the table at these people who'd spent so many years not seeing me clearly. Who'd confused credentials with competence, prestige with purpose. Who'd finally learned to look past their assumptions and see the person I'd been all along. I'm a nurse practitioner, I told my nephew. And I love my job. He grinned. Can I be a nurse practitioner too? If that's what you want to do, I said, your family will be very proud of you. And for the first time in my life, I knew that was completely true. The plane leaves in 3 weeks. 12 communities, 12 opportunities to prove that healthcare excellence isn't about where you trained or what letters follow your name. It's about showing up with competence, compassion, and commitment to the people who need you most. My suitcase is packed with medical supplies and hope. My phone contains contact information for the local leaders, community health workers, and volunteers who'll help me understand each place I visit. My heart carries the lessons I learned in my own clinic, that healing happens in the space between clinical excellence and human dignity. But mostly, I'm carrying the knowledge that I finally have a family who sees me clearly. Who understands that the daughter who chose nursing over medicine didn't settle for less, she chose differently. She chose a path that led directly to the communities that needed her most. And that makes all the difference. Sometimes the people who love you most are the last ones to see who you've become. But when they finally do see you, really see you, the recognition means more than any award or accolade ever could. Because it means you're finally visible at your own table. My name is Mia Smith. I'm a nurse practitioner, a healthcare innovator, and someone who learned that your worth isn't determined by other people's ability to understand it. If you're building something that matters, keep building. The right people will see it eventually. And when they do, make sure there's room at your table for grace. Thank you for listening. And remember, your work matters, whether or not anyone else understands it yet.